Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 117, and it is about money. Specifically, it's about the many requests and questions that I've gotten over the past 2 decades about how to perform full-time. I've been putting this episode off because it is dense. I've got a whole outline in front of me. I intend to make this like a masterclass in performing arts income according to the Church of Rachel Strickland. It may very well be a part 1 to a 2-part episode for that reason. So I'll save the updates for the end of the episode. I just want to dig into this, okay? The question that sparked this, I've gotten this question in one form or another about 1,000 times in my career as an artistic mentor and as a coach. And this time it came from my beloved TaiTai, who asked how to leave my fucking morning job without having a plan B and I still have bills to pay. Now, the frustration is palpable in this question because it is very frustrating. I don't need to explain why it's frustrating. You already know, so I won't. Here's my first question. I want you to consider the reason you got into the arts. I personally don't know a single of the many hundreds of artists I know, a single solitary practitioner who decided to make the arts their lives because they wanted the lucrative financial abundance that comes with creating and presenting art. That's an important point. People don't become artists to make money. People become engineers and doctors and lawyers and open up Carl's Jr.'s franchises to make money in congruence with other values and interests and abilities that they have. The arts is unique in this way. It doesn't mean that there's no money in the arts. It means that the reason people become involved in the arts is not because they want to get rich from it. This will come into play later in the episode. But I just want to ask you that question. Consider the reason that you want to do this. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to perform full-time? And what do you expect that life to be like? We all hope, rightly so, that money will follow our labor and that we'll at some point get restitution for our extremely hard work. And I hope that that's true, but it's not the point of why we're doing it. It's not why we get into it. So my first question to you is to ask yourself, why have I gotten into this? What is the point? What is my why? Why do I want to do this? What do I think my life is going to be like if I'm working full time in my creative discipline? Like, pause this episode, go write that down now. It will be important for you to note. If anyone writes down so I can make a lot of money, please DM me because I'm fascinated to hear more about that. So we've established, like, the reason people get into the arts is not because they want or they think they're going to, like, get rich quick. That's never the reason. But when people do go full time and they've been in the field for like a year or so, they do inevitably start to look around and wonder, like, why is my labor valued so much less than a software engineer or a financial advisor? I remember one year when I was performing full-time, we were living in San Francisco and Manflesh worked for Google at the time. I had worked my fucking ass off all year. I'd made shows, I'd made duets, I'd made new acts, maybe like 3 or 4 new acts that year, and I was teaching, and his Christmas bonus was more than my entire yearly income. That was rude. That was a rude moment, but it was a true moment, and truth is what we're after right now. Do I think this is like right and a good thing? No, of course I don't. I think that the arts should be valued very, very high in our culture for all of the value that it gives into the culture. So no, I don't think it's right, but it is accurate. And I'm not here to lie to you. I'm not here to say and to tell you that it's very likely you can make a living with only your creative work. I'm not saying it's probable. I'm saying it's possible. I'm here to tell you that it's possible. I'm here to remind you that it's possible. Never that it's likely. I have definitely supported myself full-time as an artist. And you might ask yourself, well, I wonder why she doesn't do that anymore. It's not because I'm old. It's not because I'm not good anymore. Frankly, I was tired of getting on a plane every month. And I had done it already. And I wanted to try something else. And my relationship with my work changed in that moment. For where I am right now in my own personal life, the work is its own reward. When I can, and I do, I make money from it. But whatever I get, I consider that to be a very fair trade for owning my own life. I'm still full-time self-employed, and I reckon I'm always going to be because I'm pretty unemployable at this point. And that's a fair trade for me. Like all the things that I would get from a full-time job that I'm totally not fit for, like health insurance and a 401k, little joke, and free lunches and free coffee and whatever the hell else happens in these places, I don't know. The trade-off is that I get to decide and I get to own my own life. Also, the downside is I own my own life. It's all up to me. Now, I prefer that way of life. So that's one of the first questions that I want to ask people when they're like, well, I only want to use my creative work to make money. Like, we need to consider what the reality of that life looks like. Do you want this reality? And come here to me. I'm going to always remind you, there is always a way to do the thing that you want. I'm not here to poop on anyone's parade or yuck anyone's yum. There's always a way. But I'm also not going to lie to you. I want to use this episode to take a look at what the reality of this situation is. So let's look at that reality, okay? If you are accustomed to a stable and lucrative income, going full-time as a freelance artist is going to be a very different life for you. This is the first thing that I don't think, like, people hear me and they believe me, but they don't really assimilate that information, and part of them believes that life will carry on and it will be the same, only you'll be free to be creative all the time. But it's not going to be the same. You'll have to learn new skills. Your relationship with your finances will change. One thing is certain, it is not the same life experience as having a stable, lucrative income from a corporate source. It's not going to be the same. I know, like, that's kind of the point. You don't want it to be the same. And all of those things that you've heard about and that you dream about, they're all true, right? Owning your own time, making your own choices, having a life of adventure and creativity, and making shows with your friends. All of that is true. All of it is true. The fantasy is true. The dream is real. That is the reward of living a creative life. You get to live a creative life. Financially, it's not going to be the same. I didn't say worse. I said different. Even if the finances are not as high, which they're likely not to be, that doesn't mean worse. It means different. So expect a very different life for yourself. And this is something important to note. I was chatting with Jenny Tufts, and I told her that it would be anonymous, but I guess I just lied. I'm sorry, Jenny. Love you. But she's a great person to chat with this stuff about. And so I was taking advantage of that. And she pointed out something that I definitely want to include, which is if you're working full-time as an artist, you're not really improving. If you're working, that's great. You're in a show, you're performing, you're making some money, and that's your life. You don't have the time and energy left over in most cases to be improving in your discipline. And that was something that I learned myself in real time through lived experience. I'm like, man, I'm working all the time, but I'm not getting any better. I'm working all the time, but I'm not making new work. I'm working all the time, but I'm not really getting stronger. I'm just sort of like staying the same. I'm like, oh, didn't realize that was going to be true. So if the reason that you want to perform full-time is that you want to be very, very proficient in your discipline and you're not yet, maybe use the funds that you have from whatever income you have right now and funnel it into your training. Because when you work and you're not training most of the time. And if your job is just taking up way too much of your life, and you're like, well, I don't even have any time left over to train or become proficient, it's like not working. I would suggest that you go to part-time, if at all possible. This is going to change your financial situation. It's going to perhaps limit your access to luxury items. And the trade-off is that you get better at your discipline, and maybe you shop at Poshmark. And now I want to read you a quote from this brilliant book by a choreographer, Andrew Simonet. He wrote it. It is called Making Your Life as an Artist. He wrote it in 2014. It's still sublimely relevant, very inspiring, very honest. And it's a very small book, and it's downloadable for free. You can also pay what it's worth. I think there's many different options to pay at different price points to get a physical copy and different price points to get an electronic copy. So very sliding scale, very accessible. He made that for a reason. Reading this book, I get pissed off that I didn't write it, if that makes sense. I could honestly just spend an entire podcast quoting this book, but for now, quote, "Artists are the only people who contribute new knowledge to the cultural realm. Others can refine, popularize, or synthesize our research, but we discover new cultural information. That is a sacred responsibility. We live in a time where we are inundated by images, pictures, language, video, stories, music, bodies. 99% of those images are made for one reason: to get you to buy something. We artists are responsible for that tiny sliver of images that can be made for every other possible reason: cultural, spiritual, political, emotional. In an age of image overload, this is a sacred responsibility." End quote. Thank you, Andrew Simonet. And I'm going to put a link to ArtistU in, so you can buy this book, and I highly encourage you to, anyone who's serious about making a sustainable creative practice for themselves, this book is a solid investment. Also, it's a business expense. So check the show notes and get yourself a copy. I'm so mad that I didn't write it. But, I'm grateful that he did. So I wanted to give you that quote to remind you of why our work is important, because this is a podcast episode about money, and people do not like to equate money and the arts, because it's not the reason that we get into the arts. So we end up not focusing on it at all. Life becomes unsustainable. The artist burns out, and all their brilliance burns out with them. There are a lot of things that I'm tired of talking about, but I am not finding myself ever getting tired of talking about the revolution that needs to occur within each individual artist around the concept of money and finances in relation to their work, because we can't ignore it. Okay, so at this point in the podcast, we have taken a good hard look at the reality of a situation, and is that a reality that you're interested in pursuing? The rewards are not necessarily financial. They can be, they're not always, but the cultural, emotional, and human rewards, very worth it for me, at least. That's a decision you have to make on your own. But one thing is certain, it is different. It is a different kind of life than having a stable, lucrative income, especially from a corporate source. It's just different, which is kind of the point, but also is going to be different. So we're coming up on 15 minutes, and I don't just want to give you some fluff. I'm going to give you actionable advice. So after everything that I just said, you're I still want to do it. I don't want to work this job anymore. I want to be full-time creative. I'm going to tell you what to do. This assumes you have competence in your discipline and you're ready to start working. How do you know if you're ready? Well, a crow flies in and hands you a potato, and you cut the potato open and it says, "You're in." No, Honestly, most people are ready to start working when they literally can't think of anything else. They're just like, this, I just have to do this. That doesn't mean that they're great and have like a high degree of proficiency in their discipline. I'm sure you've noticed lots of people are working that aren't super skilled in their discipline. They're two different skills. But I will presume that if you're ready to follow this advice, you're not like falling out of the air. Like, you have competence, okay? Advice number 1. I recommend all human beings, especially Americans, have 3 months of living expenses saved at all times. If you want to quit your job, I would recommend you make that 6 months to a year, and I would lean heavily towards the year. So all people, regardless, should have 3 months of living expenses saved at all times. Want to quit your job? 6 months to a year. I would recommend the year. I said the whole thing twice, so you wouldn't have to remind it, but you'd definitely hear it again. Number 2, these savings should be in a high yield savings account. If you have a savings account and it's not a high yield savings account, you're losing money. Most savings accounts give you like pennies of interest on what's sitting there. And if it's 3 months of living expenses, that's anywhere from like $6,000 to $20,000 that you're earning pennies on. High yield savings accounts are free, and they're anywhere, like 4 to 5%. 5% is pretty high. So like, don't make me come over there. You got savings accounts? Make sure they're high yield savings accounts. You don't even have to go into a bank in most cases. You can just do it online. I bank with Capital One. They do me right. I absolutely fucking hate Bank of America, and I think they should die in a fire. Please don't use them. With Capital One, it's all online banking. I made all of my savings accounts high yield, because otherwise you're just like losing money. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's advice number 2. Make sure it's a high yield savings account. If you're in any country other than the United States, I'm so sorry, I'm not familiar with your banking systems. Also, if you're in any country other than the United States, congratulations. I know you have your own challenges, but they're just different. Action advice number 3, get out of credit card debt. I don't think there's anything wrong with you if you have credit card debt. It's not a moral failing on your part. Look at the system that you're operating in. Not your fault, okay? But if you want to move forward into a life that is much less predictable than a stable, lucrative income, you can't afford to have credit card debt. It's too expensive. One thing you can do if you look at your credit card debt and you're like, this is going to take me some time to pay off. What you do is you call that bank. You say, I've been a customer for this amount of time. I'd like you to lower my interest rate. Yes, I have done this, and yes, it worked. And no, I didn't think of it. It was advice given to me by Ramit Sethi, who I've been following for about 17 years. He's always done me right. The simplest way to learn from him is to buy his book. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and it's full of actionable advice like that will save you money and set you up for greater success. That will be linked in the show notes around the 18 minutes, 45 seconds mark. My next question to you as actionable advice is, what are your non-negotiables? Chances are you're an adult, I hope. That means there are certain things in your life that you're probably not willing to change. Is it important to you that you stay in a certain geographic location? Note that. Is it important to you that you be able to support your geriatric cats / parents / support your cheese habit? Note that. Know what your non-negotiables are. That will help you define the parameters in which you can create an action plan for yourself moving forward. If it's non-negotiable for you to stay in the city that you're currently in, it makes no sense to audition for a cruise ship unless you're happy to be gone for 3 to 8, 9 months at a time. Action advice number 4, you need to know how much your life costs. You need to know how much do you need to pull in per month to pay your bills. This includes any savings contributions that are important to you to make, any of the non-negotiables that we mentioned above, subscriptions you can't live without, insurance, etc. Avoidance is not the way to get yourself free. This is a 1%er kind of action, right? Most people have no idea how much their life costs on a monthly basis. If you find out how much you need to survive every month, you are already heads and shoulders above. Once you find out what that figure is, consider it. Is it too much? Do you think it's an unreasonable amount to make on a freelance artist income? If it is, consider mercilessly cutting costs on shit you don't care about so that you can spend freely on things that you do care about. I am pretty good at this, so let me give you an example. I never, ever go get my hair cut or manicures. Very, very rarely will I get a massage. And it's mostly because I just don't care. So like salons, haircuts, colors, manicures, facials, I don't spend money on those things. I don't think they're frivolous. I do not. I think that they're excellent and wonderful. But they just don't add anything to my life. I don't really care about them. So I don't do them, which means I have a lot more money to spend exorbitantly on cheese or books, as I am wont to do. This will make a bigger difference in your life if you're choosing like high ticket items, like cars. I have never really given a shit what kind of car I drove. I am now kind of like a diehard Prius fan because they're inexpensive to own. My last car was 20 years old before I sold it to my sister, and then, yes, I finally bought myself a new car. First time since 2014. And yes, it feels like a spaceship, but there was just all of those years. That's like 10 years that I didn't have a car payment because I didn't care, so that I could spend exorbitantly on work-related education expenses, which is something that I really like to be able to just spend on when I want to. So that's a way that you can like kind of get real with yourself. And if that number, this is how much your life costs per month, if that number looks too high to you, that's one way to make a dent in it. Which is also advice from Ramit and his book. Check the show notes. Actionable advice number 5. Are we at 5? I'll go through them again briefly, but I highly recommend, if you're going to be self-employed, you familiarize yourself with the Profit First system. My amazing accountant, Sandi York, introduced this to me via the Movement Maestro years ago, and it changed everything for me. I never, ever freak out about paying my tax bill, quarterly or at the end of the year, because I already have that money set aside, and that's because of Profit First. So you pay yourself first. That's what Profit First means. Realistically, you can expect to keep and personally use for like books and cheese and car payments about 50% of the money that you pull in. You can expect to spend 30% of the money that you pull in on the cost of doing business. These are business expenses like liability insurance, costuming, equipment, job supplies, private lessons, etc. If you are spending more than 30% on running yourself as a business, we might want to look at that. I'd say around 5% should go to your high yield savings account and 15% for self-employment tax. This is pretty United States specific. I don't know anything about the tax codes in other nations. All of this should be in high yield savings accounts, the tax and the general savings. And you can mess with these numbers. You can change the percentages. It's very easy. I'm going to put a link to a very simple spreadsheet in the show notes. Just believe me when I tell you, it changed everything. And it makes it so much clearer to me how much I have to spend and where I might be needing to examine things further. I'll also put a link to Sandi because she's awesome and amazing, and I love her. So if you need some help with your accounting and you're in the United States, I would definitely follow Sandi, give her a message, see if she has room if you need someone to do your books for you. You'll notice that all the actionable advice I've been giving you so far has been basically financial. This is because I want to set you up for success. You already know how to get better at what you're doing. You know how to seek out teachers to improve your skill. You know how to go into a studio to train. You know how to make work. I don't need to tell you those things right now. If you're wanting to work in your creative practice full time, this is almost always the portion of our lives that needs to be focused on. Because I want you to succeed and not be burnt out. More actionable advice: have a plan. Get a mentor. If you have a mentor, use them. As a mentor myself, I can say that I love it when people actually use me. When they've hired me or they've joined the Audacity Project and they actually use me and I really get to know them personally, that's when it's chef's kiss, right? The more we know about you, the better questions you ask, the more that we can help you. Because this work is not going to just fall into your lap. You need to have a plan of action. And if you don't know how to build that plan of action yourself, use a mentor to help you. Those courses and webinars that you bought and you barely watched, go back and watch them again. Get all the meat off the bones. Talk to people who are doing what you want to be doing. Ask them for their advice. Or people who have done what you want to do. Please do not skip this step. Learn from our fails. Learn from our victories. I can say we're pretty damn happy to share those things. There are also some things that you will need to operate as a professional. Yeah, you want a website. And I don't care when people are like, you don't need a website, you can use your Instagram profile. Oh, really? You want to rely on Instagram for that? I don't think so. Like, there's no reason not to have a website to comport yourself as a professional when it's free and easy. Like, the times that we live in, they have a lot of pitfalls. This is not one of them. Anyone can make a website. You don't even have to pay for it. What a time to be alive. My first website I made with HTML, and no, I had no idea what I was doing. Stupid. What do you want to have on your website? You want to have an about page that has your bio and your headshot. You want your CV to be on there. You want a demo reel at least, and examples of your previous work. You'll want to have a photo gallery, and you'll want to have a contact page. That's very, very bare bones. I just gave you the Audacity Project. Yes, we take 8 weeks to do that, and I give you a lot more specific details and talk to you individually about what you yourself need. But like, that's essentially it. That's what we're doing, is like creating an online profile for you so that it's easy for you to go after opportunities and follow the game plan that I mentioned before. And actually, I wasn't even planning on doing this, but cycle 28 of the Audacity Project is approaching rapidly. So if you'd like to be on the waitlist for that and get this shit together yourself, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. I'm going to onboard in February, and we're going to have a March-April cycle. And I promise I'm a lot nicer. Like, I'm all fired up right now, which is pretty much a good thing. So, much longer episode than normal. We're coming up on 30 minutes. This whole episode was definitely not meant to bum you out. Not trying to bum you out. I am trying to create sustainable, happy artists who can make their work unabashedly without burning out into oblivion. And that doesn't happen if we ignore the realities of the systems and structures that we're living in. So, quick review. I definitely got wonky with the numbers as I was excitedly telling you these things. This is the actionable advice, okay? And it's, I think it's 1 through 8, right? Number 1, have a savings account with 6 to 12 months of living expenses saved. Number 2, all of your savings accounts should be high yield savings accounts. Number 3, get rid of your credit card debt. You can't afford it. It's too expensive. Number 4, know your non-negotiables. Number 5, find out how much your life costs per month. It will also make it much easier to do number 1. Number 6, familiarize yourself with the Profit First system. Please just use the spreadsheet that I'm giving you in the show notes. It is free. It is there. Please use it. Number 7, talk to people. Use your mentors. Get a mentor. Talk to people who have done what you want to do or are actively doing it. Save yourself grief. And number 8, have your shit together. The things that you need to operate as a professional. So if we're going to walk into this strange new country, we're going to do it with our eyes open and listen to the stories of those who are there and who have been there and lived in that strange country for a while. And I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning. Everything you've heard is true. The freedom of making your own choices, how beautiful it is to wake up naturally when you want to wake up and do creative tasks all day long, all that is true. Yeah, there's admin in there too, but you don't even care because it's building your creative life. That's what we're trading for. And no, it is not the same as having a stable, lucrative income. And yes, it is exactly what you think it will be, possibly with some more reality thrown in there. I wouldn't have it any other way myself. Looking at the time, there we are, right on the 30-minute mark. Let's see, this is dropping on Wednesday, the 22nd of January, which means the event occurred on the 20th. I'll be ignoring it. What I will have done that day is to open Creatrix to the public and the remaining spots that are left. So if you want to reward yourself for all of the things and come to Edisto Island and learn some witchcraft with me and look at a bird and take a nap in a hammock and swim in the tidal creek, you can check the show notes because it's open now. The application is open. It's public domain. So have a look-see. Let me know if you have any questions. And thank you to TaiTai for asking me the question in such pointed language that I'm like, oh damn, I gotta make a big old episode about this. And there's gonna be a part 2 next week, and that's gonna be about undercutting. You can expect me to be fired up about that as well. I hope that this was useful to you. If it was, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with someone else that you thought it could help. If you have requests for future episodes, you can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, and I want to give an extra special shout out to my patrons for standing with me in the feckin' times and in the fallow fields. Thank you for believing in me and for making this and so much more that I do possible. This could not exist without you. Until next time, friends, I will say one more time as a reminder, there is always a way to do what you want to do. Don't go back to sleep.